The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. But what happens when something defies every sensor, every theory, every rational explanation? The USS Enterprise-D hummed with the quiet efficiency of a starship at peace. Captain Jean-Luc Picard sat in his ready room, reviewing reports from the Federation's latest diplomatic initiatives when the lights flickered. It was subtle, barely perceptible. But Picard had commanded starships long enough to recognize the signature of a cascade failure in the fabric of space itself. On the bridge, Counselor Deanna Troi felt it before the alarm sounded, a sudden spike of disorientation, as if reality itself had hiccuped. Her empathic senses screamed of anguish and confusion, foreign and intense, bleeding across the subspace barrier like blood through water. "Captain, to the bridge," Picard's voice cut through the growing alarm, calm and authoritative. He was already moving toward the turbolift when Chief Engineer Geordi LaForge's voice crackled over the comm. "Captain, we're detecting a massive energy signature off the starboard bow. It's not a warp signature, not a known weapon system. The readings are..." LaForge paused, and Picard heard the confusion in his voice. "They're impossible, sir." The transporter room erupted in cascading red lights as Chief O'Brien struggled to contain what was happening in the buffer. 3 humanoid patterns had materialized simultaneously, their energy signatures defying classification. They weren't Starfleet. They weren't Borg, or Romulan, or any known species in the Federation database. Their biosignatures read as fundamentally human, same DNA structure, same basic physiology, but overlaid with something else. Something that shouldn't exist. Picard arrived on the bridge to find the viewscreen alive with sensor data. Worf, the ship's security chief, was already coordinating with Transporter Chief O'Brien. "Captain, we have 3 confirmed life signs in the transporter buffer," Worf reported, his Klingon features set in the grim expression of a warrior facing an unknown threat. "They are humanoid, but their energy readings are unprecedented. Medical and engineering recommend we keep them in the buffer until we can determine." "Belay that," Picard interrupted, his eyes studying the cascading data. "Counselor, what are you sensing?" Deanna's eyes were closed, her hand pressed to her temple. "Fear, Captain. Intense confusion. They're terrified, but not of us. Of the displacement itself. It's like they've been torn from something fundamental to their existence." Picard made his decision. "Chief O'Brien, transport them to sickbay. Medical alert. And I want a full containment team standing by. Worf, yellow alert. Data, analyze those sensor readings. I want to know everything, origin point, energy composition, anything that might tell us where they came from." The shimmer of the transporter materialized 3 figures in sickbay. Dr. Beverly Crusher, the Enterprise's chief medical officer, gasped at what she saw. A tall man with dark hair and Sharingan eyes lay on the biobed, barely conscious, his hand instinctively reaching for the woman beside him. She was younger, her pink hair striking against the sterile white of the medical bay, her green eyes already assessing the room with clinical precision. Between them stood a teenage girl with the same dark hair as the man, her expression fierce and protective, one hand on a kunai that had inexplicably materialized with them. "Stand down," Crusher said firmly, her hands raised in a universal gesture of non-aggression. "I'm Dr. Beverly Crusher. You're aboard a Starfleet vessel, and you're safe. My name is Beverly." The woman with pink hair slowly lowered her weapon. Not a kunai, Crusher realized with shock, but something that looked organic and deadly, crackling with what appeared to be pure electricity. The woman's eyes darted between her companions and the doctor, making a rapid calculation. "I'm Sakura," the woman said, her accent unfamiliar but her English perfectly clear. "This is Sasuke, and this is Sarada. Our daughter." She paused, her gaze locking on Crusher's. "Where are we? What is this place?" Before Crusher could answer, the tall man, Sasuke, straightened, his Rinnegan eye swirling with concentric circles of power. His gaze swept across the sickbay, taking in the medical technology, the viewports showing stars, the very structure of the room, as if he could see the threads of reality binding them together. Another dimension, he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of certainty. The barrier between worlds has fractured. We're not home. Picard arrived in sickbay moments later, Data at his side, already processing every detail of the three visitors. The captain moved with the measured grace of a diplomat, his hands open, his expression carefully neutral but warm. I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard, commanding officer of the Federation starship Enterprise-D. You've materialized aboard our vessel under circumstances that are, frankly, unprecedented. I'd like to understand how you came to be here. Sakura's eyes met his, and in that moment, Picard recognized something. A woman calculating whether to trust, whether to reveal, whether to fight or flee. He'd seen that same calculation in the eyes of Romulan commanders, of Klingon warriors, of beings facing existential uncertainty. We were training, Sakura began slowly. On the land of lightning. Sasuke was conducting a spatial exercise with his Rinnegan, a dimensional sensing technique. There was a rupture in space. We were caught mid-transport, caught between one reality and another. She glanced at Sasuke, and he gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The readings suggest a transdimensional rift, Picard mused, looking to Data for confirmation. Affirmative, Captain, Data replied. The energy signature present in their cellular structure matches exotic matter theories postulated by Dr. Miguel Alcubierre. They possess dimensional properties that shouldn't exist in our universe. The laws of physics appear different in their origin point. How different? Picard asked. Data tilted his head slightly. Sufficiently different, Captain, that I cannot yet classify their abilities using Federation science. Their energy signatures, what they refer to as chakra, do not correspond to any known force in our periodic table of elements. Sasuke's Rinnegan narrowed. You don't understand what we are, he said flatly. Where I come from, jutsu, techniques of energy manipulation, are as fundamental as your weapons or your technology. In our world, the strongest shinobi can destroy mountains. Can reshape battlefields. Can manipulate time itself. Shinobi. Picard leaned forward slightly. You're warriors. More than that, Sakura said. We're protectors. Guardians of our village, our nations, our people. Sasuke is an elite, one of the most powerful shinobi alive. I'm a medical specialist, trained in healing jutsu. And Sarada. She glanced at her daughter with pride and concern. She's the next generation. The future. Sarada stood straighter at her mother's words, her Mangekyo Sharingan pulsing faintly, a display of power that caused every sensor on the bridge to spike simultaneously. Picard heard Worf's sharp intake of breath over the comm. Captain, recommend immediate containment protocols, Worf's voice cut through. That energy spike matches weapons-grade output. Stand down, Worf, Picard commanded, his eyes never leaving Sasuke's. They're not attacking. He turned back to Sakura. Your daughter, she's showing signs of extreme power fluctuation. Is she stable? She's frightened, Sakura said simply. So am I. We don't know where we are, when we are, what this universe is, or if we'll ever see our home again. Sarada's Sharingan reacts to emotional distress. The more afraid she is, the more power bleeds through. Picard nodded slowly, understanding blooming. He'd faced species that seemed godlike, beings of pure energy, temporal anomalies that defied comprehension. But this was different. This was a family, torn from their home, facing an impossible situation in a universe they didn't understand. Dr. Crusher, full medical workup. Humanoid physiology, but I want to understand this chakra system they're describing. Data, work with our guests on classifying their energy signatures. And someone get them comfortable quarters, they're not prisoners, but they are not to leave this section of the ship until we understand what we're dealing with. He paused, looking directly at Sasuke. We will help you get home. That's what Starfleet does. But first, we need to understand what happened. Will you help us? Sasuke's Rinnegan swirled once more, and Picard could almost feel the weight of that gaze, assessing, calculating. Finally, the shinobi nodded. We'll talk. But understand, Captain, where we come from, trust is earned through honor, not protocol. You'll need to prove you're worth our alliance. Picard smiled slightly. I wouldn't expect anything less. The Enterprise-D's medical bay had never encountered physiology quite like what Dr. Crusher was examining. Sasuke reclined on the bio bed with visible reluctance, his dark eyes tracking every movement of her medical tricorder as if it were a potential weapon. Sakura stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder, a gesture that spoke volumes about their relationship. Sarada sat across the room, her Sharingan eyes following the holographic displays that flickered to life around them. Your cellular structure is fascinating, Crusher said, her clinical fascination momentarily overriding her diplomatic caution. Fundamentally human, but with enhancement at a genetic level. It's like you've been optimized, faster healing, greater muscle density, neural pathways that operate at speeds I've never recorded. If I didn't know better, I'd say you were engineered. We're born this way, Sakura explained, her medical knowledge evident in how she spoke. Shinobi families with particular bloodlines, clan heritages, pass down these traits. In our world, it's as natural as your genetics, but amplified through selective breeding and rigorous training over generations. My strength, Sasuke's Sharingan abilities, Sarada's inherited traits, they're all expressions of lineage and dedication. Crusher's eyes widened. Wait, you're saying these abilities are genetic? That there are entire populations in your dimension with powers like this? Hundreds of millions, Sasuke said flatly. 5 major nations. Countless clans. Organized militaries built around jutsu mastery. Your federation has no equivalent. Data entered the sickbay, his positronic brain already processing terabytes of information. I have completed preliminary analysis of the exotic energy signatures present in your cellular structure, he announced to Sasuke. The readings suggest a form of biological energy manipulation that does not correspond to any known subatomic particle or force. However, I have identified patterns consistent with quantum entanglement at the neurological level. Explain, Sasuke commanded. Your brain structure demonstrates neural pathways that operate partially outside conventional spacetime, Data continued, his tone reflecting genuine intellectual fascination. It is theoretically possible that what you call chakra is a form of localized quantum coherence, consciousness itself interacting directly with the fundamental fabric of reality. Your ability to manipulate it would constitute a form of reality warping, albeit on a limited scale. Sakura leaned forward. In simpler terms, in your universe, consciousness and physics are separate disciplines, Data explained. In yours, they appear to be unified. Your mind can literally reshape matter and energy through focused intention and training. It is remarkable. Crusher made a note on her PADD. Which means if we try standard Federation medical procedures, especially anything involving the nervous system, we could cause unpredictable reactions. Sasuke, have you ever been treated with technology not from your world? Never, he replied. In our dimension, we have technology, but it's not like this. No transporters. No tricorders. Our healing methods are biological, either jutsu or surgical. Your machines are an unknown variable. Then we'll proceed carefully, Crusher assured him. I'd like to do a deep cellular scan to understand your physiology better, but we'll do it manually. Slower, but safer. As Crusher began her meticulous examination, Picard arrived on the bridge to find the situation escalating. Data's ongoing analysis of the transdimensional rift had yielded troubling results. The energy signature wasn't random, it had a directionality, a source point. Someone or something had deliberately opened that rift. Worf turned from his station, his expression grave. "Captain, we've detected subspace transmissions from the neutral zone. Romulan signature. They're querying Starfleet databases about dimensional anomalies and exotic energy phenomena." "They know," Picard said quietly, understanding the implications immediately. "Somehow, the Romulans have already learned about our visitors." "There's more, sir," LaForge's voice cut through from engineering. "I've been analyzing the temporal characteristics of that rift, and the readings are strange. The energy discharge pattern suggests advanced technology, Romulan or possibly beyond. The rift didn't just happen, Captain. It was created. Deliberately." Picard's hands clasped behind his back, a gesture Troy recognized as his thinking posture. "Someone was experimenting with transdimensional rifts and caught our guests in the crossfire." "That would be my assessment, sir," LaForge confirmed. "Whoever did this knew what they were doing. This wasn't accidental probe discharge or a sensor malfunction. This was a controlled experiment." The implications hung heavy in the air. Picard made a decision. "Issue a Priority 1 subspace message to Starfleet Command. Inform them of the situation and the potential Romulan involvement. And raise shields to maximum without going to red alert. I don't want to appear openly hostile, but we're taking precautions." Back in sickbay, the atmosphere had shifted. Crusher had completed her initial scans, and the data was unsettling. She called Picard immediately. "Captain, you need to see this," she said when he arrived. "I've found something that changes everything about how we approach this situation." She activated the holographic display, showing a three-dimensional representation of Sasuke's neurological structure. What appeared was unlike anything in Federation medicine, networks of luminous pathways flowing through his brain, some of which seemed to exist partially outside normal space. "These neural patterns," Crusher explained, "are impossible by our understanding. But here's the critical part. They're active. Constantly. Which means Sasuke's brain is under tremendous stress just maintaining its own integrity in our dimension. It's like his consciousness is being pulled in two directions simultaneously." Sasuke's eyes narrowed. "Explain the practical consequences." "It means you need to rest," Crusher said bluntly. "A lot of rest. Your body is working overtime just existing in our universe. Extensive use of your abilities, especially anything involving dimensional manipulation, could cause catastrophic neural damage. You're not weakened, exactly. You're just strained." Sakura's hand tightened on Sasuke's shoulder. "How strained?" "If he uses significant jutsu for extended periods without rest, it could trigger a cascade failure in his neural pathways," Crusher said quietly. "It wouldn't kill him immediately, but it would eventually degrade his cognitive functions. Permanent damage." The silence that followed was absolute. Sarada stood abruptly, her Sharingan flaring. "You're saying our father is injured? Weakened?" "I'm saying your father's physiology is adapted to a specific universe, and this one puts stress on his systems," Crusher corrected gently. "With proper rest, proper understanding of his limitations here, he'll be fine. But he needs to treat this like an injury that requires recovery time." Sasuke's expression remained impassive, but Picard saw the micro-expression of frustration flicker across his face. This man, accustomed to being among the most powerful in his world, was now constrained by physics he couldn't control. "There's something else," Crusher continued. "I detected traces of dimensional residue in all three of you, fragments of the rift that brought you here. If we could analyze those residues, we might be able to trace the rift back to its origin point. Which means we might be able to determine who created it and potentially how to reverse it." Picard leaned forward. "Could you return them home?" "Theoretically. Maybe. Practically. We'd need to understand their universe's physics, how their chakra system interacts with dimensional barriers, and we'd need to replicate or interface with whatever technology created the original rift. It would be a massive undertaking. But possible, Picard said. Possible, Crusher confirmed. But I won't lie to you, Captain, it could take years. Picard turned to Sasuke. We will commit Federation resources to this. That's a promise. But in the meantime, we need to understand more about your situation. And we need to understand why the Romulans are suddenly interested in dimensional anomalies. Worf's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, we're receiving a hail from a Romulan vessel at the edge of the neutral zone. They're requesting information about our recent sensor anomalies. Picard's jaw tightened. Patch them through to my ready room. And increase yellow alert status. I want shields ready to raise at my command. He looked back at Sasuke. Your arrival may have attracted the wrong kind of attention. In our galaxy, power like yours is either coveted or feared. And the Romulans tend toward both extremes. Sasuke stood, his Rinnegan eye focusing on Picard with intense clarity. Then we need to be ready for what comes next. In our world, when someone shows interest in your power, it's because they want to use it, or eliminate it. How are you prepared to respond? Picard met his gaze without flinching. With diplomacy first. Strength second. We don't start wars, Sasuke. But we finish them if necessary. That's a philosophy I can respect, Sasuke replied. But understand, the enemies in our galaxy are far different from what you face in yours. When power like ours is at stake, diplomacy often becomes a casualty. Picard headed toward his ready room to face the Romulan communication. He realized that Sasuke's warning was more prescient than the Shinobi could possibly know. In the hours to come, the delicate balance between exploration and conflict would be tested. And three warriors from another universe would find themselves caught in the center of a game they didn't yet understand. The holographic viewscreen in Picard's ready room flickered to life, revealing a Romulan commander whose face was marked with the distinctive ridges of the Romulan Star Empire. Commander Vextil's expression was carefully neutral, but his dark eyes betrayed calculated interest. Captain Picard, Vextil began, his tone deceptively cordial. We detected an unusual energy disturbance in Federation space near the neutral zone approximately 3 hours ago. Our scientific vessels have been monitoring transdimensional phenomena in the region. Surely you would cooperate with a neighboring power regarding such anomalies? Picard recognized the gambit immediately. The Romulans weren't asking about the rift, they were fishing for confirmation that Picard knew about it. And if they already knew about the rift, they almost certainly knew about the 3 refugees who had emerged from it. Commander, we did detect an anomaly, Picard said carefully. Our science team is still analyzing the data. If you have relevant information about transdimensional rifts occurring in this region, we would welcome a collaborative investigation. The Enterprise is prepared to share findings in the spirit of interpower cooperation. Vextil's mandibles twitched, Picard's equivalent of a smile. How generous, Captain. Might I ask if your investigation has yielded any unexpected artifacts or discoveries? Exotic matter, perhaps? Unusual biological signatures. There it was. The confirmation Picard needed. The Romulans didn't just know about the rift. They knew about Sasuke, Sakura, and Sarada. Our investigation is ongoing, Commander, Picard replied smoothly. Once we have conclusive data, we'll file a formal report with the Federation Science Council. I'm certain they'll be happy to share relevant findings through official diplomatic channels. Of course, Vextil said, leaning back in his chair. Though I should mention, Captain, that some discoveries are too dangerous to remain under Sol Federation custody. Should we discover that the source of this anomaly poses a threat to the stability of the quadrant, the Romulan Star Empire might need to take preventative measures. I'm certain such measures would violate the Neutral Zone Treaty, Picard replied coolly. And I'm equally certain that the Federation would defend its sovereignty vigorously. Then we understand each other perfectly, Vextil said, his smile widening. Safe travels, Captain. Perhaps we'll speak again soon. The transmission ended, leaving Picard staring at a blank screen. He activated his comm immediately. Worf, increase to red alert. Position us between the Romulan vessel and the warp core. Full shields. And I want a continuous scan of that warbird's weapon status. Aye, sir, Worf responded immediately, his Klingon instincts already anticipating the escalation. Picard then contacted Data. Mr. Data, I need you to accelerate your analysis of the dimensional residue in our guest's physiology. The Romulans know they're here. It's only a matter of time before they attempt to acquire them through less diplomatic means. Understood, Captain, Data replied. I will redirect computational resources accordingly. However, Captain, there is a complication. The dimensional residue is already beginning to dissipate. Within approximately 72 hours, it will be unrecoverable. If we wish to understand the origin point of the rift, we must conduct our analysis before that window closes. 72 hours. 3 days to unlock the secrets of dimensional travel before the evidence evaporated. And 3 days before the Romulans made their move. In the Enterprise's guest quarters, Sasuke stood before the viewport, watching the stars stream past. In his home dimension, he had stood atop mountains and perceived the fabric of Chakra itself flowing through the world. Here, his Rinnegan could sense the structure of subspace, the quantum foam underlying reality, but it was muted, like looking through clouded glass. Sakura entered quietly, carrying tea she'd asked the replicator to prepare in a style from their home. She pressed a cup into his hands. Crusher told you, she asked, not as a question but as acknowledgement. That my abilities are constrained in this dimension, Sasuke replied. Yes. We've faced worse odds, Sakura said, settling beside him. We've been separated before. We've fought enemies that seemed unbeatable. And we've always found a way through because we're not alone. Sasuke's expression softened fractionally, the closest he came to showing vulnerability. The Romulans are coming. You heard the captain's conversation. I heard enough, Sakura confirmed. Picard warned Crusher. She told me. In this dimension, there are powers that want what we have. Just like home. But not like home, Sasuke corrected. At home, I am among the strongest. I have defeated gods, manipulated time itself, transcended the limitations of mortal existence. Here. He paused, his Rinnegan eye swirling with frustration. Here, I am constrained by physics I don't fully understand, and my power comes with a price I didn't anticipate. Sakura placed her hand on his arm. Your strength was never just about jutsu, Sasuke. It was about will. About determination. About protecting what matters to you. That doesn't change, no matter what universe we're in. Before Sasuke could respond, alarms shrieked throughout the ship. Red lights flooded their quarters, and Picard's voice came over the emergency channel, all hands, condition red. Romulan warbird decloaking at bearing 270, distance 50,000 kilometers. Yellow alert protocols insufficient. Battle stations. On the bridge, Worf stood rigid at his tactical station, fingers flying across the controls as weapons systems powered up. Captain, the warbird is raising shields and powering weapons. They're moving to intercept course. Any hails? Picard asked, his voice steady despite the elevated tension. Negative, sir. They're not attempting communication. Their weapons are hot and charging. Picard had faced the Romulans countless times. He knew their tactics, their psychology, their tendency toward aggressive posturing. But this felt different. This felt like a calculation based on information they shouldn't have. LaForge, I need maximum warp on 1 minute's notice. Data, full sensor sweep. I want to know if there are any additional Romulan vessels nearby. 1 moment, Captain, Data replied. Within seconds, confirmed. We are detecting 2 additional Romulan vessels, both decloaking at bearing 185, distance 40,000 kilometers. They are executing a pincer maneuver. 3 warbuds. A coordinated assault. This wasn't opportunistic, this was a planned operation. Hail all 3 vessels, Picard commanded. Open a channel. The view screen shifted, showing all 3 Romulan ships. A single commander appeared. Not Vextil, but someone higher in rank. Proconsul Talek, whose scarred face and cold eyes marked him as someone who had clawed his way to power through ruthlessness. Captain Picard, Talek said, his voice like grinding stone. You are harboring fugitives from a classified Romulan research project. Those individuals are considered Federation property now, recovered through Romulan science. You will surrender them immediately, or we will remove them by force. The individuals aboard the Enterprise-D are under Federation protection, Picard replied firmly. They arrived in our space through no action of theirs or ours. They are refugees, not prisoners, and they will not be surrendered to any hostile power. Then you have made your choice, Captain, Talek said, and his image cut off as the Romulan vessels opened fire. The Enterprise bucked as disruptor bolts raked across her shields. Worf's hands moved with practiced precision, returning fire with the ship's phaser array. The Enterprise's shields flared under the assault, but held, barely. Shields at 80% and dropping, Worf reported. If we engage all 3 simultaneously, we cannot maintain shields and continue evasive maneuvers. Then we don't try to fight all 3, Picard said. LaForge, plot a course that takes us through the asteroid field at bearing 190. Maximum evasive pattern. Go now. The Enterprise dove toward the asteroid field, her superior maneuverability giving her an advantage the heavier Romulan warbuds couldn't match. Disruptor bolts screamed through space as the 3 Romulan vessels pursued, but the treacherous terrain of floating rock gave Worf opportunities for evasive action the Romulans hadn't anticipated. Direct hit on their port shields, Worf reported, a note of satisfaction in his voice as he landed a clean phaser strike. 2 more hits and we can penetrate their defensive matrix. But Picard knew this was a delaying action, not a victory. 3 warbuds against 1 starship, even with the Enterprise's superior technology and crew training, was still a losing proposition if the engagement lasted long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Data, status of that dimensional analysis. Still incomplete, Captain, Data replied. However, I have made a preliminary determination. The dimensional residue contains traces of what appears to be a Romulan signature. Specifically, Tal Shir technology integrated with unknown quantum mathematics. It is possible the Romulans deliberately opened the rift as part of an experiment. Why would they deliberately open a transdimensional rift? Picard demanded, even as he ordered evasive action to port. Multiple hypotheses, Captain, Data responded. Most likely, the Romulans were attempting to access parallel universes to acquire resources or weapons technology. The presence of the Uchiha family was either incidental or a calculated discovery. Which means they know exactly what capabilities our guests possess, Picard concluded grimly. They're not after 3 refugees. They're after Shinobi. In the guest quarters, Sasuke felt the ship shudder as weapons fire found their mark. His Rinnegan eye, even constrained by this universe's physics, could perceive the pattern of the attack, 3 coordinated assaults, designed to overwhelm by attrition rather than finesse. Sarada grabbed the edge of the viewport, her young face set with determination. We have to help. We can't just hide while they fight for us. No, Sakura said firmly. We don't know the capabilities of their weapons. We don't understand this universe's combat dynamics well enough. But we understand combat, Sarada countered, her Sharingan blazing. We understand strategy, tactics, the manipulation of energy. We could get killed, Sasuke interrupted, his voice cutting through like a blade. He moved toward the door. But Sakura is right about one thing, we can't remain passive. If the Romulans want us badly enough to risk war with the Federation, they'll eventually get through Picard's defenses. We need another option. He activated the comm. Captain, this is Sasuke. We're ready to assist. What do you need? Picard's response was immediate, his tactical mind already recalibrating possibilities. Sasuke, I appreciate the offer, but I need you to understand the situation first. Those vessels are Romulan warboats, they operate on principles of military technology you've never encountered. Engaging them without proper training could be catastrophic. We understand combat, Sasuke replied calmly. We understand how to read an opponent's movements, exploit weaknesses, and strike at critical points. The medium is irrelevant. The medium is everything, Picard countered, even as he ordered another evasive pattern that sent the Enterprise banking hard to starboard. Another disruptor bolt raked across their shields. 72% now. The Romulans were adapting, learning the Enterprise's evasion patterns. In your world, you manipulate energy directly. Here, our weapons operate through technological intermediaries. The lag time, the targeting systems, the shield frequencies. Everything is different. Data's voice cut through the tactical chaos. Captain, I concur with Mr. Sasuke's assessment from a theoretical perspective. His neural architecture, as we've observed, operates on quantum principles that allow for intuitive pattern recognition at speeds far exceeding standard human cognition. Applied to tactical analysis, his predictive capabilities could provide significant advantage. He's also operating at partial capacity, Crusher's voice added over the comm from sickbay. Using significant jutsu in extended combat could cause neural cascade. I can't recommend it. Then we compromise, Sasuke said, and Picard heard something in his voice, not request, but statement of intent. I will not use large-scale jutsu. I will use my perception only. My Rinnegan can see patterns in energy flow, in subspace itself. I can anticipate where their weapons will strike, how their shields will respond. I can be your tactical advisor. Picard weighed the options in the span of a heartbeat. The Enterprise was being outmaneuvered, and within minutes, the Romulans would corner them in the asteroid field where escape velocity would be compromised. They needed an edge. Come to the bridge, Picard ordered. Worf, clear a station for our guest. And get him a headset, I want real-time tactical feed to his visual cortex. Sasuke arrived on the bridge in under a minute, his composure absolute despite the violent shuddering of the ship under weapons fire. Worf, his Klingon sensibilities instantly recognizing a warrior of considerable skill, gestured him to the auxiliary tactical station with grudging respect. Shields down to 65%, Worf reported as Sasuke took position. Port Nacelle is showing stress fractures from that last hit. If we take another direct strike there, we lose warp capability. Sasuke activated the tactical display, and for a moment, his Rinnegan eye seemed to glow with inner light. What he perceived went far beyond the visual spectrum. He saw the quantum fluctuations in the Romulan shields, the harmonic resonance patterns of their disruptor arrays, the subspace distortions created by their cloaking technology even as it faded away. To his perception, their attacks weren't random discharges of energy. They were a song, complex, but followable. The warbird on the port side, Sasuke said quietly, his finger pointing to the screen. Its shield frequency is oscillating. Every 2.3 seconds, there's a harmonic gap in the shield matrix lasting 0.4 seconds. Fire when the next gap appears. That's a 0.4 second window, Worf said skeptically. No targeting computer could calculate. He's not asking the computer, Data observed. He's providing prediction based on pattern recognition. Fire when ordered, Mr. Worf. The seconds ticked by. The warbird on the port side maneuvered, trying to bring its weapons to bear. Picard watched the tactical display, trusting Data's assessment of the Shinobi's abilities. Now, Sasuke commanded. Worf's fingers moved across his station, and the Enterprise's phaser array fired with surgical precision. The beam struck the Romulan warbird exactly at the moment its shields flickered, penetrating to the hull and causing an explosion that cascaded across its starboard side. Direct hit. Worf reported, a note of grudging approval in his voice. Their shields are fluctuating. They're dropping to yellow alert status. The starboard vessel is compensating, Sasuke said, his voice unchanged, but his Rinnegan eye tracking the second warbird's maneuvers. They're adjusting their shield harmonics based on what they just witnessed. In 4.7 seconds, they'll shift to a new frequency configuration. But the transition will require them to briefly power down their forward weapons array to allocate energy. Fire at that moment. What followed over the next 3 minutes was extraordinary. Sasuke calling targeting solutions with preternatural accuracy, predicting the Romulans' movements before they fully executed them. It was as if he could see 3 seconds into the future, reading the quantum probabilities of their decisions and calculating the inevitable outcomes. The starboard warbird took a crippling strike to its warp core. The ventral vessel attempted a flanking maneuver, but Sasuke anticipated it, guiding Worf to position the Enterprise for maximum shield efficiency at the exact moment the disruptor volley came. Incoming hail from the lead Romulan vessel, Data announced. Proconsul Talek is requesting parley. On screen, Picard commanded. Talek's scarred face appeared, and for the first time, Picard saw something that looked like genuine concern, perhaps even fear, in the Romulan's eyes. Captain Picard, Talek began carefully. It appears we may have misunderstood the situation. The individuals you harbor possess capabilities we did not anticipate. Perhaps a more diplomatic approach would be beneficial. An excellent observation, Proconsul. Picard replied coolly. I agree completely. Here are my terms: you withdraw your vessels immediately to the neutral zone. You file no official reports about this encounter with Starfleet Command. And you cease all research into transdimensional rifts in Federation space. In exchange, the Federation will not escalate this incident beyond a formal diplomatic protest. Talek's mandibles twitched, genuine anger, barely contained. But he calculated quickly. 3 damaged warbirds, 1 still cloaked and uncommitted to the battle, against a Starfleet vessel piloted by a captain willing to fight and advised by someone with tactical abilities Romulan intelligence clearly hadn't accounted for. You drive a hard bargain, Captain, Talek said. But very well. We accept your terms. The Romulan Star Empire has no interest in unnecessary conflict with the Federation. The transmission cut off, and seconds later, the 3 Romulan warbirds disengaged, moving back toward the neutral zone with deliberate slowness, military discipline that said they were retreating by choice, not necessity. Shields down to 48%, Worf reported. Phaser banks at 70% capacity. Structural integrity holding at acceptable levels. Captain, we got lucky. We had more than luck, Picard said, turning to Sasuke. We had insight. Sasuke's Rinnegan eye had dimmed, and Picard noticed the Shinobi's hand trembling slightly as it fell away from the tactical console. The exertion, even without direct jutsu use, had taken a toll. You should rest, Data observed, his positronic sensors detecting the elevated cortisol levels and decreased neural efficiency. Your cognitive processing is already showing signs of fatigue from the dimensional strain combined with sustained tactical analysis. Understood, Sasuke replied, his voice steady despite the physical cost. But the Romulans will return. Not with warbirds, but with something else. They came for us specifically. They won't abandon that. Objective simply because one encounter failed. He's right, Picard acknowledged grimly. The Romulans don't accept defeat, they accept strategic repositioning. Proconsul Talek will report this to the Tal Shir, and they will develop new approaches. We've bought time, not peace. He stood, his command posture reasserting itself. Damage report from all departments. Worf, coordinate with LaForge on shield repairs and weapons system restoration. Data, accelerate your dimensional analysis. We now have even less time before the Romulans make another move, and this time they'll come better prepared. Picard turned to Sasuke as the bridge crew sprang into action around them. Your offer of assistance proved invaluable. But you were correct about your limitations in this universe. Using your abilities extensively could cause permanent damage to your neural structure. We need you healthy, not heroic. In my world, there's no difference, Sasuke replied. Heroes are those who are willing to sacrifice everything. In this universe, Picard said, heroes are those who find another way. Come, Dr. Crusher will want to monitor you after exerting yourself. And we have much to discuss about the Romulan involvement in your arrival. As Sasuke followed Picard toward the turbolift, he found himself reassessing the Federation captain. Picard didn't lead through dominance or intimidation, as Sasuke might have expected. Instead, he led through intelligence, ethics, and the creation of circumstances where his people could excel. In a way, it reminded Sasuke of Naruto, a leader whose strength came not from personal power, but from his ability to bring out the best in those around him. Perhaps, Sasuke reflected, this universe had lessons to teach after all. The Enterprise's conference room was austere compared to the ornate meeting halls Sasuke remembered from his own dimension, but it served its purpose, a neutral ground where information could be exchanged and strategies debated. Picard sat at the head of the table, flanked by Data and Crusher. Across from them, Sasuke, Sakura, and Sarada occupied the opposite end, their expressions carefully controlled despite the weight of what they were learning. The dimensional residue in your cellular structure contains Romulan technology signatures, Data explained, his hands moving across a PADD to display holographic analysis. Specifically, quantum encryption matrices consistent with Tal Shir research protocols. However, the underlying mathematical framework is not Romulan in origin. It appears to be derived from your universe's theoretical physics. Meaning? Sakura asked, her medical knowledge allowing her to understand the technical aspects but seeking clarification on the implications. Meaning, Picard said carefully, that someone in the Romulan government conducted research into transdimensional mechanics using knowledge or technology from your universe. That technology couldn't have originated with the Romulans alone. They either acquired it, or they obtained detailed scientific information about your world. Sasuke's Rinnegan eye narrowed. Which means they've been watching our dimension. Studying it. Planning this. For how long? Sakura demanded, her protective instinct flaring. How long has our world been under surveillance? Unknown, Data replied. However, the encryption matrices suggest the research has been ongoing for at least 5 to 7 years by Federation time measurement. Which would be approximately 12 to 15 years in accelerated Romulan research protocols. Sarada stood abruptly, her Sharingan blazing with barely controlled energy. They knew where we were. The rift wasn't random, they targeted us. They wanted us specifically. It appears so. Crusher confirmed quietly. Your bloodline abilities, your genetic markers, your capacity to manipulate energy in ways that defy conventional physics, the Romulans would see all of that as incredibly valuable assets. Either for military applications or for reverse engineering your abilities into weapons technology. The table fell silent. The implications were staggering. Not only had the Uchiha family been ripped from their home dimension by a deliberate act, but they'd been deliberately targeted. This was no accident, it was an abduction. There's more, Data continued, pulling up additional data streams. Analysis of the rift's origin point suggests it was created within Federation space, specifically near a classified Romulan research station that officially doesn't exist. The station is located in a pocket of spatial anomalies that makes it nearly undetectable to standard Federation sensors. A hidden facility, Picard mused. Which means Section 31 has likely suspected its existence but never confirmed it. Section 31. Sasuke asked, his tactical mind immediately recognizing the designation as a potential threat vector. Starfleet Intelligence's most secretive division, Picard explained, distaste clear in his voice. They operate outside normal Federation law and oversight, justified by the argument that protecting the Federation sometimes requires morally questionable methods. They are problematic. Are they a threat to us? Sakura asked directly. Potentially, Picard admitted. If Section 31 learns that you exist, they will want to study your abilities, understand your physiology, determine how to replicate or counter your powers. They will justify it as necessary for Federation security. They may even be right, from a strategic perspective. But they won't ask permission, and they won't be gentle about the process. Sasuke leaned back in his chair, his mind calculating probabilities and outcomes. So we have multiple threats, the Romulans who brought us here and want to recapture us. Section 31, who wants to study and weaponize us. And potentially other factions who might seek us out once word spreads. We're not refugees. We're assets in a game we don't understand. Not entirely accurate, Data interjected. While your assessment of the threat vectors is correct, Captain Picard has demonstrated commitment to your protection that supersedes strategic consideration. His negotiations with Proconsul Talek were designed to secure your safety, not to exploit your abilities. This suggests the Federation as a whole is not monolithic in its approach to your situation. Data's right, Crusher added. Picard could have handed you over to Section 31 the moment you arrived. The political capital alone would have been enormous. Instead, he's putting the Enterprise and his career at risk by sheltering you. Why? Sarada asked, genuine confusion in her young voice. We're strangers to him. We've brought danger to his ship, his crew. What does he gain? Picard stood, moving to the viewport where the stars streamed past in their infinite parade. In my experience, true exploration, whether it's exploration of space or understanding of people, requires trust without guarantee of return. Your arrival presented the Federation with a unique opportunity to prove what we stand for. The belief that all sentient beings, regardless of origin or capability, deserve dignity and the right to self-determination. That's not pragmatism. It's principle. He turned back to face them. However, principles don't protect you from Romulan weapons or Section 31 operatives. We need to develop a plan that addresses both the immediate threat and the larger strategic landscape. What are our options? Sasuke asked, his warrior's mind already cataloging possibilities. Option 1, Picard began, is to attempt to return you home. Data is accelerating his analysis of the dimensional residue. If we can understand the rift's creation mechanism, we might be able to replicate it in reverse. However, this would require time and resources, and it would broadcast our intentions to anyone monitoring subspace communications. How long? Sakura asked. Data's preliminary estimate is 6 to 8 weeks, Picard replied. Possibly longer if we encounter complications. And during those 6 to 8 weeks, the Romulans will be planning their next move, Sasuke observed. They know we're on the Enterprise. They'll have reinforcements, better intelligence, and contingency strategies. A direct assault failed, but they'll adapt. Precisely, Picard acknowledged. Option 2 is to find you sanctuary. There are Federation colonies and research stations where you could be protected while we work on a return solution. It would be less glamorous than starship life, but potentially safer. That's not an option, Sarada said flatly. We're not hiding. We're warriors. If we're targets, then we face it directly. Sakura placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, acknowledging her courage but tempering it with maternal wisdom. We also need to consider what's best for our family as a unit. Sarada is still learning to control her abilities. Sasuke is operating at partial capacity due to the dimensional strain. I'm the only one at full functional capacity. Running or hiding might be the strategic choice. There's option 3, Data said quietly. We could leverage your unique position to negotiate with the Romulans and potentially other factions. Your abilities, your knowledge of a parallel universe, your value as a potential source of technological innovation, these are all bargaining chips. That would make us slaves, Sasuke said coldly. Bartering our freedom for safety is no different than being captured. I would rather die than accept that outcome. Which is why option 3 is problematic, Picard conceded. It trades one form of imprisonment for another. That leaves us with option 4. He paused, letting the weight of what he was about to suggest settle over the table. We go on the offensive. We don't just react to threats, we eliminate them. Specifically, we neutralize the Romulan research station that created the rift. If that facility is destroyed, not only do we eliminate the immediate threat source, but we also recover any data they've collected about your dimension. It sends a clear message: the Federation and its guests are not to be trifled with. The silence that followed was profound. This was different from defending against the warbuds. This was initiating military action against a sovereign power, even a hostile one. That would be an act of war, Crusher said quietly. It would be viewed as such by the Romulan Star Empire, Picard confirmed. However, the Federation and the Romulan Empire have been in a state of perpetual tension for centuries. A limited strike against a facility conducting illegal weapons research would be justified as necessary defense, and the broader Federation would likely support it, particularly once we reveal the Romulan involvement in your abduction. Sasuke stood, his Rinnegan eye blazing with renewed purpose. I'm in favor of option 4. In my world, we learned long ago that enemies must be confronted decisively. Half measures and hesitation only embolden them. If the Romulans want war, let them have it. This isn't about wanting war, Picard cautioned. This is about protecting your family and the countless others who might be targeted by that research facility in the future. But understand, this choice has consequences that extend far beyond our immediate situation. It will change the diplomatic landscape of the entire quadrant. Then it needs to be done correctly, Data observed. Captain, I recommend we gather intelligence on the research station's current operational status, defensive capabilities, and personnel. We should also alert Starfleet Command to our intentions and seek official authorization for the operation. Acting without authorization would compromise the Federation's moral standing. Agreed, Picard said. We proceed with intelligence gathering first. Worf will coordinate tactical planning. Sasuke, your insights into strategic planning would be invaluable. Sakura, your medical expertise might help us understand what kind of research they were conducting. Sarada, Picard turned to the young shinobi, for now, focus on controlling your abilities in this environment. Your potential is enormous, but untrained power is as dangerous to ourselves as to our enemies. As the group dispersed to their respective tasks, Picard found himself reflecting on the trajectory of events. 3 days ago, the Enterprise had been on a routine patrol. Now it was on the verge of initiating military action against the Romulan Star Empire. And at the center of it all were 3 people from another dimension, whose very presence was rewriting the Federation's strategic calculus. In the corridor outside the conference room, Sasuke paused beside a viewport, his Rinnegan eye perceiving the subspace fluctuations that layered across the quantum foam of this universe. Somewhere in the dimensional barrier between his world and this one, home was waiting. But first, there was a reckoning to be had. For the first time since arriving in this strange new galaxy, Sasuke felt something familiar, the clarity of purpose that came before battle, the certainty that transcended doubt. Whatever came next, he would face it as he always had, with power, with will, and with unwavering commitment to protecting those he loved. The Enterprise's stellar cartography lab hummed with quiet efficiency as Data worked alongside Sakura, analyzing the dimensional residue with meticulous precision. What had begun as pure scientific inquiry had evolved into something more complex, a collaboration between two brilliant minds operating from fundamentally different paradigms yet arriving at complementary conclusions. Your understanding of energy manipulation is remarkable, Data observed, adjusting the microscopic sensor array to focus on a particularly dense concentration of chakra particles. You perceive phenomena that Federation science would require decades of theoretical development to conceptualize. Your medical knowledge, in particular, suggests a level of biological understanding that rivals our most advanced research. Sakura studied the holographic display, her green eyes tracking the quantum fluctuations with practiced ease. In our world, medicine and combat are intertwined. To heal someone, you must understand how to harm them. To manipulate chakra through the body's systems, you must know every muscle fiber, every nerve pathway, every organ's function. We don't separate healing from physiology, they're one discipline. A philosophical approach that would revolutionize Federation medical practice, Data noted. However, I have a question that troubles me from a logical perspective. If your world operates on entirely different physical principles, how is it that your biology is fundamentally identical to ours? The probability of parallel evolution producing humans with the same genetic structure is astronomically small. Sakura paused, considering. We've asked ourselves the same question since arriving here. Sasuke has theories based on his Rinnegan perception, something about how different universes might branch from the same source point, maintaining baseline compatibility even as they diverge. But honestly, we don't know. That's a mystery from our own dimension. Perhaps it's a mystery from our own dimension. Perhaps it's a mystery worth investigating, Data suggested. If the Federation and your civilization could collaborate on understanding the nature of dimensional mechanics, the implications for both our peoples would be extraordinary. If we survive the next few weeks, Sakura replied pragmatically. Right now, we're focused on staying alive and finding a way home. Theoretical physics can wait. In the Tactical Operations Center, Worf and Sasuke pored over schematics of the hidden Romulan research station. Starfleet intelligence had provided preliminary data, enough to understand the facility's basic configuration, but not enough for a surgical strike. The station is built into an asteroid, Worf explained, his Klingon instinct for warfare evident in how he analyzed the defensive positions. 3 shields generators, 12 weapons emplacements, and a crew complement estimated at 200 personnel. Approaching from any standard vector would trigger automated defenses. The Romulans would have us in weapons range before we could initiate shields. Then we don't approach from a standard vector, Sasuke replied. His finger traced across the holographic display, highlighting a section of the asteroid that appeared solid. Your sensors show dense mineral composition here. But from my perception, using my Rinnegan to read subspace distortions, there's a cavity within the asteroid. A natural formation that the Romulans likely don't know about because your standard scans can't penetrate the interference. Worf's eyes narrowed with appreciation. A blind spot in their defensive grid. More than that, Sasuke continued. The cavity connects to the station's lower power distribution junction. If we could position a strike team there, they could potentially sabotage the shield generators from inside the facility. Your starship would then have an opening to attack before they could raise backup defenses. That's a dangerous approach, Worf said. Bluntly. The strike team would be deep inside enemy territory with no extraction route if the operation fails. All effective strategies require risk, Sasuke replied. In my experience, the warriors who survive are those willing to embrace danger rather than fear it. That's a warrior's philosophy, Worf acknowledged with something approaching respect. A Klingon philosophy. But the Federation prefers methods with higher survival probability. Then we find a way to combine both approaches, Sasuke suggested. Your technology for tactics, our warrior principles for execution. The strike team goes in knowing the risks. But we plan the operation so thoroughly that success becomes probable rather than miraculous. Worf nodded slowly. I'll present this to Captain Picard. Your tactical insights have proven valuable. But understand, if this operation proceeds, you'll likely be part of the strike team. You'll be going into combat on an alien world against enemies trained in warfare you've never encountered. I've trained my entire life for exactly this scenario, Sasuke replied. Combat in unknown circumstances against superior numbers. It's what Shinobi do. Picard received the preliminary tactical assessment in his ready room, reviewing it alongside Admiral Sati from Starfleet Command via secure subspace link. The Admiral's expression on the view screen was grave. The weight of command decisions that could reshape galactic politics evident in every line of her face. Captain, what you're proposing is bold, Admiral Sati began carefully. If it succeeds, you'll have eliminated a significant Romulan threat and demonstrated that the Federation will not tolerate transdimensional weapons research in our space. If it fails, you'll have initiated a military conflict that could destabilize the entire quadrant. The Romulans initiated the conflict when they conducted illegal weapons experiments and targeted Federation space for abduction operations, Picard countered. We're not aggressors, Admiral. We're responding to an existential threat. I understand your perspective, and I concur with your assessment of the threat, Sati replied. However, the Federation Council is divided on how to respond. Some members advocate for immediate negotiation with the Romulan government, framing this as a rogue element conducting unauthorized research. Others want a full military response. Still others believe we should hand over the refugees to Section 31 and let them determine the appropriate course of action. Picard's jaw tightened. Section 31's involvement would compromise the moral authority of this operation entirely, Admiral. We're not conducting this strike because the refugees are valuable assets. We're conducting it because the Romulans violated sovereign space and attempted abduction. Those two justifications are different, and the Federation's future reputation depends on which narrative we establish. Admiral Sati leaned back in her chair, considering. You're asking me to authorize military action that could have cascading consequences across the entire quadrant. I'm asking you to authorize a limited, targeted operation against an illegal weapons facility, Picard corrected. The consequences will be what they are. But the alternative? Allowing the Romulans to continue their research, potentially abducting more people from across dimensions, is unacceptable. After a long pause, Sati nodded. Authorized, Captain. But I'm placing strict parameters on this operation. No civilian casualties. No destruction beyond what's necessary to neutralize the threat. And no escalation beyond the primary target. If Romulan reinforcements arrive, you withdraw immediately. The Enterprise is valuable, but not more valuable than avoiding full-scale war. Understood, Admiral, Picard replied. We'll proceed carefully. The strike team assembled in the Enterprise's transporter room, Worf leading, with Sasuke as tactical advisor, to security officers, and Chief Engineer LaForge to manage the sabotage of the power systems. It was a small team for a dangerous operation, but size wasn't what mattered, precision and coordination were. Sakura observed from the observation deck above, her maternal instinct warring with her understanding of tactical necessity. Sarada stood beside her, her Sharingan eyes tracking every detail of the operation with the focus of someone learning how actual warfare conducted in this universe. Your father will be fine, Sakura said, though her voice betrayed uncertainty. He'll be more than fine, Sarada replied with the confidence of youth. He's fought enemies far more dangerous than Romulans. He's defeated gods, Mother. A research facility is just another obstacle to overcome. Sakura wanted to believe that. But she'd also learned through painful experience that overconfidence bred casualties. The Romulan Star Empire was ancient, technologically advanced, and ruthless. They weren't gods, but they were far from defenseless. In the transporter room, Sasuke checked his equipment one final time. The Federation had provided him with a Type 2 phaser and a communicator that would allow him to stay linked with the strike team. He'd refused the body armor. It would restrict his movement and, more importantly, impede his ability to use his Sharingan for tactical assessment. Worf approached, his expression unreadable. Final briefing. We beam down at these coordinates, 200 meters from the cavity entrance. The asteroid's mineral density will mask our transporter signatures from Romulan sensors. Once inside the cavity, we proceed to the power junction. LaForge disables the shields. We signal the Enterprise. Picard initiates the assault. We extract before the Romulans can respond. Simple, Sasuke observed. Simple plans have higher success probability, Worf replied. It's the complicated ones that collapse when reality intervenes. Are you ready? Sasuke's Rinnegan eye flared. With power, his chakra reserves rallying despite the dimensional strain. I was born ready. Let's finish this. The transporter chief nodded, and Worf stepped onto the pad. Sasuke and the security team followed, taking their positions. LaForge entered last, his PADD already displaying the Romulan power grid schematics he would need to navigate. Energize, Worf commanded. The familiar shimmer of the transporter beam seized them, and the Enterprise's transporter room faded. For a moment suspended between realities, Sasuke felt the strange sensation of his atoms being disassembled and reconstructed, a process that reminded him uncomfortably of how different this universe's physics truly were. They materialized in darkness, the only light coming from the faint luminescence of the asteroid's mineral composition. Worf activated his wrist beacon, casting harsh shadows across the rocky terrain. The cavity opened before them like a mouth. Natural, ancient, and perfectly suited for their purposes. Stay sharp, Worf whispered over the comm. Romulan security patrols could stumble across us at any moment. Sasuke, use your perception to warn us of incoming hostiles. They moved forward into the cavity, Sasuke's Rinnegan allowing him to perceive the quantum fluctuations that indicated the presence of other life forms. 2 Romulan guards approximately 50 meters ahead, standing near what appeared to be a maintenance entrance. No others in immediate proximity. 2 sentries ahead, Sasuke reported. Standard patrol formation. Alert but not actively searching. We take them quietly, Worf decided. No phaser fire, the noise will alert others. Close combat only. What followed was a brutal reminder of how different combat was in this universe. Worf's Klingon strength and combat training proved formidable, but Sasuke's Sharingan-enhanced reflexes gave him an advantage. He moved with precision born of centuries of shinobi tradition, his strikes carefully calibrated to incapacitate. Without killing. Both Romulan guards fell without ever raising an alarm. Efficient, Worf observed, respect clear in his voice. They proceeded deeper into the facility, moving through corridors of Romulan engineering and design. The power junction was just ahead, a massive chamber housing the main power distribution systems that fed the shield generators. LaForge moved to the control interface, his hands flying across alien technology with practiced ease. Give me 3 minutes. Their security protocols are sophisticated, but not beyond Federation engineering understanding. I can bypass them. The seconds stretched like hours. Sasuke stationed himself at the chamber entrance, his Rinnegan extended to maximum perception, scanning for approaching threats. The quantum fluctuations of the asteroid structure and the facility's energy systems created a complex tapestry, but through it all, Sasuke perceived the distinct signatures of approaching Romulans. Movement, he reported quietly. 8 personnel, approximately 60 seconds out. They're heading directly toward our position. Worf made an instant decision. LaForge, how much longer? 90 seconds, LaForge replied, sweat beading on his forehead as his fingers worked frantically across the interface. We don't have 90 seconds, Worf said grimly. He activated his comm. Enterprise, we have Romulan security inbound. Accelerate timeline. Picard's response came immediately. Understood. Initiating attack run. All hands, weapons hot. The asteroid beneath them shuddered as the Enterprise's phaser arrays opened fire, hitting the shield generators with devastating precision. Alarms shrieked through the facility, and suddenly stealth was no longer a consideration. Shields down. LaForge reported triumphantly. Romulan defensive grid is offline. Go, go, go. Worf commanded, and the strike team moved toward the transporter coordinates with the Romulan security force in pursuit. Weapons fire echoing through the corridors behind them. The asteroid corridor erupted into chaos as disruptor fire raked across the walls, leaving scorched trails of vaporized rock. Sasuke moved with supernatural grace, his Sharingan eye tracking each incoming bolt and allowing him to guide Worf and the security team through a path of minimal exposure. Behind them, the Romulan security force, now numbering at least a dozen personnel, pressed forward with disciplined intensity. Transporter coordinates in 20 seconds. LaForge shouted over the comm, his engineering expertise now devoted entirely to keeping them alive long enough to beam back. Worf returned fire with his phaser, the weapon's beam finding 2 Romulan guards and dropping them to the ground. But for every enemy they neutralized, 2 more seemed to emerge from the facility's labyrinthine corridors. This was their world, their territory, and they fought with the desperate intensity of soldiers defending their home. Sasuke made a split-second calculation. They wouldn't make the transporter coordinates in time if the pursuit continued at this intensity. He needed to create a barrier, something that would slow the Romulans without causing permanent casualties. Cover me, he said to Worf, and before the security chief could respond, Sasuke stopped running. His hands moved in a familiar pattern of chakra manipulation, the seals coming as naturally as breathing despite the dimensional strain. The technique was one he'd perfected years ago, a foundation of shinobi combat, something even Sarada could execute with reasonable efficiency. Water style, water wall. The contradiction of his words manifested with impossible reality. In the middle of an asteroid, surrounded by mineral walls and recycled air, Sasuke summoned water from the moisture in the very atmosphere itself. The water coalesced into a roiling barrier between his position and the pursuing Romulans, 20 feet high and impenetrably dense. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The pursuing Romulan security force halted their advance, weapons drawn but temporarily blocked by the aqueous shield. Their confusion was palpable, they'd never encountered anything like this before, and their tactical protocols didn't account for environmental manipulation of this sophistication. What the? One of the security officers breathed, his voice filled with awe and fear. Move! Sasuke commanded, already moving himself. The water wall wouldn't hold long. Chakra manipulation in this universe consumed energy faster than it should, and he could feel the drain intensifying. Now. They sprinted for the transporter coordinates, LaForge's voice counting down in their ears, 5 seconds, 4, 3. The transporter beam seized them just as the water wall collapsed behind them, crashing to the ground in a cascade that briefly blocked the Romulans' path. The asteroid vanished, and they materialized back in the Enterprise's transporter room in a shimmer of blue light. Shields up. Picard's voice commanded across the ship's comm, full evasive maneuvers. LaForge, divert all available power to weapons and shield systems. The Enterprise shuddered as it accelerated away from the asteroid. Behind them, the hidden Romulan facility was descending into chaos. Shield generators offline, internal power systems critically damaged, and multiple sections venting atmosphere into the void. The strike had succeeded beyond their initial expectations. Casualty report, Picard demanded as Worf and Sasuke arrived on the bridge, still bearing the dust and carbon scoring of combat. 2 Romulan personnel neutralized during extraction, Worf reported, his Klingon efficiency cutting through the adrenaline. No Enterprise casualties. LaForge successfully disabled the primary power distribution system. The facility is now operating on backup generators only. Long-term viability is questionable. Excellent work, Picard said, then immediately turned his attention to the tactical displays. Status of Romulan reinforcements. 3 warbuds emerging from cloak at bearing 230, data reported. Distance 35,000 kilometers and closing. They appear to be responding to distress signals from the research station. How long until they're in weapons range? Picard asked. Approximately 4 minutes at current approach velocity, Captain. Picard made his decision with the practiced ease of a commander who'd faced countless tactical crises. Set course for the nearest Federation border station. Maximum warp. Maintain shields at full strength and keep weapons charged. I want to be ready if they attempt to intercept us. The Enterprise's engines came to life, the massive ship accelerating through space with a surge of power that pushed everyone on the bridge against their restraints. Behind them, the Romulan warbuds maintained their pursuit, but the Enterprise's superior speed gave Picard the edge he needed. Sasuke watched the tactical display with fascination. The pursuit was different from anything in his experience. No hand-to-hand combat, no direct confrontation, just the elegant mathematics of velocity and positioning playing out across the stars. Yet the principles were identical: use your strengths, minimize your enemy's advantages, and create opportunities for victory. They're not pursuing aggressively, Sasuke observed to Picard. They're maintaining distance, not attempting to close. Why? Data turned from his console, his positronic processors having drawn identical conclusions. An astute observation. The Romulan vessels are maintaining a pursuit vector that suggests they intend to monitor our trajectory rather than engage. Their weapons are charged but not powering for sustained combat. They're trying to determine where we're heading, Picard realized. If we lead them to a Federation starbase, they'll have intelligence on our closest defended positions. They're gathering strategic information. Then we provide them with false intelligence, Worf suggested, his tactical mind already calculating scenarios. Alter our heading to suggest we're proceeding to Starbase 515, then redirect to the actual destination once they commit to pursuit. Exactly, Picard agreed. Helm, adjust course to 275 Mark 6. Make it look like we're running for Starbase 515. The Enterprise banked, and the Romulan warbuds adjusted their intercept course accordingly. It was a game of strategic deception, the kind of warfare that Picard had perfected over decades of command. Meanwhile, in sickbay, Crusher was running a full diagnostic on Sasuke, who'd collapsed almost immediately after arriving back on the Enterprise. His neural readings were alarming: damage throughout his cerebral cortex, elevated stress hormones, and quantum coherence metrics dropping dangerously low. Your body is literally beginning to destabilize, Crusher said bluntly, reviewing the scans with genuine concern. The water technique you used, it consumed far more energy than expected. Your dimensional strain combined with that massive energy expenditure has accelerated the degeneration of your neural pathways. How long? Sasuke asked, his voice steady despite the physical toll evident in his trembling hands. Before permanent damage? Crusher hesitated. Hours, maybe a day if you rest and avoid further jutsu use. If you attempt another technique like that, you could suffer catastrophic neural collapse. Sakura, who'd been present during the entire strike operation through the tactical displays, moved to Sasuke's side. You knew, she said quietly, understanding flooding her voice. You knew using that technique would damage you, and you did it anyway. It was necessary, Sasuke replied simply. The team wouldn't have made the transporter coordinates otherwise. Worf, LaForge, and the security officers would still be on that asteroid, facing Romulan weapons fire. I made the only choice available. That's a suicide choice, Crusher said harshly. And it's not acceptable. You're not going on any more combat operations. You're staying in sickbay under constant observation, and you're going to focus entirely on recovery. The dimensional residue is still dissipating. Data's voice came over the comm from stellar cartography. Captain, my analysis has reached critical mass. I now have sufficient data to understand the mechanism by which the dimensional rift was created. However, the process of reversing the rift, returning our guests to their home dimension, will require significant resources and carry substantial risk. Picard, still focused on the tactical chase occurring around them, made an instant decision. Continue your analysis, Data. Once we lose the Romulan pursuit, we'll review your findings in detail. For now, focus on ensuring the data is secure. I don't want the Romulans accessing any information that might allow them to replicate the Rift technology. The pursuit continued for another 8 hours as the Enterprise engaged in a complex dance of misdirection and tactical positioning. Eventually, as the starship approached Federation space near Starbase 515, the Romulan warbuds broke off their pursuit, maintaining a respectful distance from the defended perimeter. Picard observed their withdrawal with satisfaction. They'd achieved their primary objective, neutralizing the Romulan research facility and protecting the refugees. The secondary objective, establishing that the Federation would not tolerate transdimensional weapons research, had been demonstrated with sufficient clarity that Romulan strategists would think twice before attempting similar operations. That evening, Picard visited sickbay to check on Sasuke personally. The Shinobi was conscious, though visibly drained, his Rinnegan eye dimmed to a faint glow. You took a significant risk today, Picard said, settling into a chair beside the bio-bed. One could argue you exceeded your tactical mandate. One could argue the mission succeeded, Sasuke replied. Your people are safe. The Romulan facility is neutralized. The objective was achieved. At cost to yourself, Picard noted. Dr. Crusher informed me of the neural damage. You may have permanently limited your own capabilities in this universe. Sasuke was silent for a long moment. In my dimension, I learned that power without sacrifice is hollow. True strength requires willingness to accept loss, to endure pain, to place others' safety above personal limitation. I haven't changed, Captain. I'm simply operating according to the principles that have guided my entire life. Picard nodded slowly. Then perhaps this universe has lessons to learn from you as well. Starfleet often loses sight of that principle. We emphasize preservation of self, safety of the crew, following protocols. Those are important. But sometimes, true heroism requires the willingness to sacrifice what we value most. Is that what you would have done? Sasuke asked. In my position? Honestly? I don't know, Picard admitted. But I respect what you chose. And I'm committing the Federation's resources to ensuring your sacrifice wasn't in vain. Data believes he can create the conditions necessary to return you home within the month. You'll need to recover, but it's possible. For the first time since arriving in the Federation universe, Sasuke felt something other than the grim determination that had carried him through crisis after crisis. He felt hope. The Stellar Cartography Lab had transformed into a collaborative research center that blended Federation science with Shinobi philosophy in ways neither civilization had anticipated. Data worked alongside Sakura at a level of intellectual synchronization that transcended the normal barriers between organic and synthetic consciousness. Sarada observed from the periphery, her Sharingan eyes absorbing every detail of how dimensional mechanics functioned, filing away knowledge that would reshape her understanding of reality itself. The quantum entanglement patterns you've identified, Sakura said, gesturing toward the holographic display of dimensional architecture, they're similar to how chakra networks interlink across biological systems. It's as if consciousness itself is the medium through which dimensional barriers thin. An intriguing hypothesis, Data replied, his positronic processors already modeling the implications. Your suggestion would indicate that consciousness, at the quantum level, is not confined to a single dimension. That awareness itself exists in a state of dimensional superposition, present in multiple realities simultaneously until observation collapses the wave function into a singular reality. Which would explain why we were so easy to target, Sakura realized, her medical training combining with the new information to form a horrifying clarity. The Romulans didn't need to know our exact location in our dimension. They only needed to identify the quantum signature of our consciousness, our neural patterns, and create a rift at the intersection point where those patterns would be most vulnerable to dimensional displacement. Data's optical sensors brightened with recognition. Precisely. They conducted research on consciousness itself, isolating the fundamental quantum markers that define individual identity across dimensional boundaries. Once they understood those markers, they could predict where and when your family would be most to dimensional displacement. Data's optical sensors brightened with recognition. Precisely. They conducted research on consciousness itself, isolating the fundamental quantum markers that define individual identity across dimensional boundaries. Once they understood those markers, they could predict where and when your family would be most vulnerable to extraction. The implications were staggering. The Romulans hadn't been conducting theoretical research into dimensional mechanics. They'd been hunting specific individuals with surgical precision, and their success with the Uchiha family suggested they could potentially target anyone whose neural signature they'd managed to catalog. "We need to inform the captain immediately," Sakura said, her protective instinct overriding scientific curiosity. "If the Romulans can do this to us, they can do it to anyone. Every person in the Federation could be at risk of dimensional abduction." Picard received the briefing in the conference room, his expression growing increasingly grave as Data explained the full scope of what the Romulan research had accomplished. "So what you're telling me," Picard said carefully, "is that the Romulans have developed the technological capability to abduct individuals from their home dimensions by targeting their consciousness signatures?" "Affirmative, Captain," Data confirmed. Moreover, analysis of the residual Romulan technology suggests they have cataloged consciousness signatures from at least 40 different individuals across multiple dimensions. We have no way of knowing what other civilizations or individuals they may have targeted. This goes beyond weapons development, Crusher said quietly. This is the development of a technology that could allow them to literally steal people from parallel realities. The strategic implications are catastrophic, Picard finished. If this capability becomes widespread knowledge, every civilization in the quadrant will want access to it. We could see a galactic arms race centered on dimensional abduction technology. Worf leaned forward. Then we need to ensure the Romulan research is completely destroyed. Not just the facility we attacked, but all records, all data, all theoretical frameworks. The knowledge needs to be erased from existence. Easier said than done, LaForge interjected via comm from engineering. Romulan security protocols are designed to prevent data loss. If we destroy the primary research station, they'll have backups at secondary facilities. And if we hit those, they'll have tertiary systems in place. The Romulans don't leave anything to chance. Then we find every facility, Picard said with steely determination. We conduct a comprehensive intelligence operation across the neutral zone. We identify every research station, every data repository, everything connected to this project. And we systematically eliminate it. That's a massive undertaking, Captain, Worf cautioned. It would require resources beyond what the Enterprise alone can provide. We'd need a full Federation response. Then we bring this to Starfleet Command, Picard decided. We present the evidence, we explain the threat, and we request the authorization and resources necessary to conduct a comprehensive operation. Admiral Sati will understand the implications. She'll help us make this happen. But even as Picard made that decision, he recognized the uncomfortable reality. Starfleet's involvement would mean bureaucracy, political considerations, and the inevitable watering down of operations by Federation Council members who saw the threat through the lens of realpolitik rather than existential danger. Sarada found herself in the Enterprise's holodeck late that evening, running combat simulations against holographic opponents. The physical exertion helped clear her mind, allowed her to process the overwhelming reality of their situation. They'd arrived in this universe expecting to be trapped in a primitive society lacking advanced technology. Instead, they'd found themselves in the middle of a complex geopolitical landscape where their very existence threatened to destabilize the delicate balance of power between multiple civilizations. "You move with excellent form," a voice said from the holodeck entrance. Sarada deactivated her simulation and turned to find Data standing in the doorway, his expression displaying what approximated curiosity. "I needed to think," Sarada explained. "Combat helps me process complex information. In our dimension, physical training is also meditation." An interesting correlation, Data observed, stepping into the holodeck. "Would you permit me to observe your techniques? I have been attempting to understand the intersection between physical movement and consciousness that characterizes Shinobi abilities. Your Sharingan, in particular, demonstrates a form of visual perception that integrates temporal prediction. I would be fascinated to understand how you integrate that capability into combat execution." Despite her earlier exhaustion, Sarada found herself intrigued by Data's genuine intellectual curiosity. He wasn't asking because he wanted to weaponize her abilities or catalog them for strategic purposes. He was asking because he was trying to understand, to learn, to expand his conception of what consciousness and cognition could encompass. "Activate holodeck program," she commanded. "Generate advanced training opponent. Level 10 difficulty." A holographic figure materialized, a skilled warrior bearing weapons analogous to those Sarada would face in real combat. The program was one she'd created during her time in sickbay, calibrated to challenge her without causing serious injury. As she engaged the hologram, Sarada found herself naturally explaining her techniques to Data. How her Sharingan allowed her to perceive the moment an opponent's muscles tense before they moved, how that millisecond of advance warning allowed her to position herself for optimal counter-response. How the Mangekyo Sharingan's genjutsu abilities allowed her to create false sensory inputs that could disorient even powerful opponents. Data processed everything with the intensity of his positronic processors, asking clarifying questions that demonstrated genuine comprehension. "Your abilities represent a form of consciousness that is genuinely alien to Federation understanding," Data observed. "Yet they operate on principles that are logically sound: predictive analysis, energy manipulation, neural integration. You are not magical, in the sense of being inexplicable. You are simply operating within a different framework of physical laws. Is that good or bad?" Sarada asked, breathing heavily from her exertion. "Neither," Data replied. "It is simply different. However, I have a hypothesis I wish to explore. Your Sharingan demonstrates the ability to perceive what might be termed probability matrices. You see the branching paths of how an opponent might move and select among them. That is remarkably similar to how my positronic processors function, evaluating multiple logical pathways and selecting the optimal response. Perhaps consciousness itself, regardless of its substrate, operates on similar fundamental principles." Meaning, Data said carefully, that despite our differences, organic versus synthetic, chakra-based versus computational, we may be more fundamentally similar than either of us might expect. Consciousness, in its essence, might be a universal principle that manifests differently based on the biology or technology that hosts it. Sarada absorbed this, finding unexpected comfort in the idea. She'd been afraid that their arrival in this dimension would fundamentally alienate them from the people they encountered. But Data's thesis suggested that understanding was possible, that the bridge between their different kinds of consciousness could be built through genuine effort and intellectual honesty. Elsewhere on the Enterprise, Sakura was conducting a training session with Dr. Crusher and the ship's medical staff. What had begun as a simple demonstration of medical jutsu had evolved into a comprehensive education on a form of healing that transcended conventional Federation medicine. The key principle, Sakura explained, her hands demonstrating the precise chakra flow patterns, is that you're not healing the injury. You're stimulating the body's own regenerative capacity and directing it with focused intention. It's not magic, it's precision manipulation of biological processes at a cellular level. But you're operating without instruments, one of the medical officers protested. How can you possibly achieve the level of precision required without visual confirmation? Because my perception extends beyond what your eyes can see, Sakura replied patiently. My hands can feel the chakra flow through a patient's body. I can sense damaged tissue, disrupted neural pathways, biochemical imbalances. I'm using my tactile and energetic perception as instruments. It's not less precise than your technology, it's differently precise. Crusher was fascinated, her decades of medical expertise allowing her to ask sophisticated questions that probed the theoretical foundations of what Sakura was demonstrating. If we could integrate your techniques with Federation medical technology, Crusher mused, we could develop entirely new approaches to trauma recovery, genetic therapy, even consciousness-level interventions. Your knowledge could revolutionize everything we know about medicine. If we survive long enough to share it, Sakura replied quietly. Right now, we're still refugees in a galaxy that sees us as either threats or resources to be exploited. Knowledge sharing requires trust, and trust requires survival. The breakthrough came 3 days later. Data completed his dimensional analysis with a precision that suggested he'd been conducting this research for years rather than weeks. The holographic display showed the complete mechanism by which the transdimensional rift had been created, a blueprint for reversing the process. The pathway home exists, Data announced to the assembled group in the conference room. However, the process carries significant risk. The dimensional rift will need to be opened at a specific spatial coordinate, aligned with a temporal window that occurs once every 37 days. The energy requirements will temporarily drain the Enterprise's power reserves to critical levels. We will be defenseless during the opening process. How long will we be vulnerable? Picard asked. Approximately 4 minutes, Data replied. During that time, any hostile vessel could attack with virtually no resistance. Which means we'll need to coordinate with the nearest Federation starbase for protection during the opening, Picard concluded. We'll announce the coordinates, have them stand by with defensive support, and execute the opening under their protective umbrella. There's another consideration, Sasuke said from where he sat in the conference room, his form still weakened by his injuries but his mind as sharp as ever. The rift opening will generate a significant energy signature. Every faction in this quadrant with advanced sensors will detect it. The Romulans will know exactly when and where we're attempting to return home. Which means they'll position forces to intercept the rift, Worf said grimly. They'll want to ensure this knowledge doesn't escape their control. Or they'll want to recapture you before you disappear back to your dimension, Crusher added quietly. Picard stood, moving to the viewport where the stars streamed past in their infinite parade. Then we make our preparations and we execute this operation with full awareness of the risks. The Romulans have already demonstrated they're willing to wage war over this technology. If we succeed in returning the Uchiha family home while preserving the knowledge of how to do so, we fundamentally shift the balance of power in this entire quadrant. He turned back to face the group. We proceed with the dimensional opening in 37 days. That gives us time to prepare, to gather intelligence, to establish protective measures. And it gives our guests a genuine chance at going home. For the first time since arriving in this universe, the tension that had defined every moment of the Uchiha family's experience in the Federation began to ease, replaced by something almost like hope. The Enterprise's bridge was a study in controlled tension as the final countdown to the dimensional opening began. 37 days of preparation had transformed the starship into a fortress of defensive capability while simultaneously preparing the technological infrastructure necessary for the most audacious scientific operation ever attempted by Starfleet. Captain Picard stood at the center of it all, his command presence steady as the metaphorical storm gathered around them. All departments report readiness, Data announced, his positronic processors managing the coordination of dozens of simultaneous systems. Starbase 285 has positioned 3 starships at defensive perimeter. Romulan sensor activity indicates they have detected our preparations. 3 warbuds are moving to intercept course. How long until they're in weapons range? Picard asked calmly. Approximately 18 minutes at current approach velocity, Captain. Picard made his decision. Helm, initiate the dimensional opening sequence now. We're not waiting for the 3-minute warning window. If the Romulans want this technology, they're going to have to go through us to get it. LaForge's voice crackled over the comm from engineering. Captain, we're operating at absolute maximum power output. If we push any harder, we'll risk overload in the main plasma conduits. One more surge and we'll lose warp capability for weeks. Then we don't take that risk, Picard replied. Hold steady at current output. Worf, prepare for immediate defensive engagement the moment those warbuds come within weapons range. In the transporter room, Sasuke, Sakura, and Sarada stood on the transporter pads, their forms surrounded by the faint shimmer of the containment field that would hold them stable during the transition. Sasuke's neural damage had progressed further than anyone had publicly acknowledged. His Rinnegan eye was barely functional, and his connection to his dimensional awareness was fading like a radio signal losing reception. But his will remained unbroken. If this works, Picard said, entering the transporter room to say his final goodbye, you'll be returning to a dimension that has no memory of your absence. To your world, you'll have simply vanished and reappeared. Days will have passed for you here, but perhaps only moments there. Time is relative in any dimension, Sasuke replied with the ghost of what might have been a smile. We understand that principle well enough. I want you to know, Picard continued, that your presence here changed the Federation. Not just strategically, but philosophically. You reminded us that heroism sometimes requires sacrifice. That power without ethics is worthless. That there are principles worth fighting for, even when the cost is steep. Sakura stepped forward, her eyes glistening with emotion. Thank you, Captain. For treating us not as threats or resources, but as people. For risking your crew and your career to protect us. Starfleet is fortunate to have someone like you. The Federation is fortunate to have had you, Picard replied. He turned to Sarada, the youngest of the 3. You have the potential to become extraordinary. Don't let this universe's limitations define your future. Remember that growth comes from challenge. I will, Sarada promised, her Sharingan eyes reflecting the determination of her parents. Picard left the transporter room, returning to the bridge just as the dimensional gateway began to manifest. On the main view screen, reality itself seemed to fracture, a visible tear in the fabric of space appearing in the designated coordinates. The rift was smaller than the one that had brought them to the Federation universe, more controlled, engineered with precision rather than born from accident. Energy output at 98% of safe operational limits, LaForge reported. The rift is stabilizing. We should have approximately 2 minutes of open passage before dimensional harmonics force it closed. 1 minute 40 seconds until Romulan weapons are in range, Data announced. The temporal physics of the moment were extraordinary. The dimensional gateway hung suspended in space, a passage between realities that should not exist, visible confirmation that the universe was far more complex and fluid than most beings in either dimension had ever imagined. In the transporter room, Chief O'Brien prepared the final transport sequence. Transport standing by, Captain. Ready to beam them home on your command. Execute, Picard ordered. The shimmer of the transporter beam seized Sasuke, Sakura, and Sarada simultaneously. For a fraction of a second, they existed in quantum superposition, partially in the Federation universe, partially in their home dimension, caught between realities in the most literal sense. Then they were gone. The moment their molecular pattern completed the transition, Alarms shrieked across the Enterprise's bridge as Romulan disruptor fire raked across the starship's shields. The three warbuds had accelerated to maximum velocity, attempting to catch the Enterprise before the dimensional gateway closed. Shields holding at 82%. Worf reported, his hands flying across tactical controls. Return fire. All weapons, maximum intensity. But Picard's attention was on the dimensional gateway, watching as it began to destabilize without the presence of the three refugees to anchor it to Federation space. The rift collapsed with a silent detonation of energy that cascaded through subspace itself, creating a shockwave that rippled across local space. The Romulan vessels were caught at the periphery of that shockwave. Two of them were thrown backward by the force, their shields flickering but holding. The third, closest to the gateway's collapse point, took the full force of the dimensional blowback. The starship's shields failed catastrophically. Its hull fractured under the pressure of forces it had no defense against. In seconds, the Romulan warbird was nothing more than expanding debris and cooling plasma. "My God," Crusher whispered from where she stood on the bridge. The dimensional collapse itself was enough to destroy them. The rift was operating at fundamental harmonic frequencies tuned to subspace itself, Data explained, his processing of the event remarkably rapid. When it collapsed without a controlled shutdown, those frequencies propagated through normal space as a form of weaponized dimensional instability. The Romulan vessel's shields, designed to protect against conventional weapons, had no defense against something operating on that level of physics. The remaining two Romulan warbuds, their sensor arrays damaged and their crews traumatized by what they'd witnessed, broke off their attack and accelerated back toward the neutral zone. The Enterprise, damaged but intact, watched them go with a satisfaction born of hard-won victory. "Status report," Picard commanded, his voice steady despite the intensity of the engagement. "Two enemy vessels retreating to neutral zone," Worf reported. "One destroyed. Our shields are at 40%. Structural integrity holding at 71%. Engineering reports significant damage to primary power systems, but warp capability is maintained. Casualty report. Minimal, sir," Worf continued. "The dimensional collapse occurred at sufficient distance to prevent casualties among our crew. We've suffered injuries from the shock wave, but no fatalities." Picard nodded, absorbing the information. They'd succeeded. The Uchiha family had been returned home. The knowledge of how to create a trans-dimensional gateway remained secure within Federation hands. And the Romulans had lost a warship and demonstrated the futility of attempting to control technology they didn't understand. But as Picard stood on the bridge of the Enterprise, watching the stars return to their normal configuration now that the rift had closed, he found himself thinking not of victory, but of loss. Sasuke's Rinnegan eye, fading from neurological degeneration. Sakura's sacrifice in sharing her medical knowledge with a universe that might never fully appreciate its value. Sarada's potential, cut short by her return home. "Captain," Data said quietly, "I have received a transmission." It was encoded in a quantum pattern that could only have been transmitted during the dimensional gateway's final moments. "It is from Sasuke." Picard turned sharply. "Put it through." The message appeared on the main view screen, not in visual form, but in a complex pattern of subspace harmonics that Data translated into intelligible language. "Captain Picard. If you're receiving this, the transition was successful. I'm home. Sakura and Sarada are safe. I wanted you to know, your philosophy, your dedication to principles over pragmatism, changed how I understand leadership. In my world, I rose to power through strength. In yours, I learned that true strength comes from bringing out the best in others. I'm taking that lesson home with me. The Federation is fortunate to have you. Live long and prosper." The bridge fell silent. No one spoke, honoring the weight of those final words transmitted across dimensional boundaries. In the land of lightning, in a training ground that existed in a reality separate from the Federation universe by barriers of quantum physics and dimensional mathematics, Sasuke, Sakura, and Sarada materialized with the same disorientation they'd experienced arriving at the Enterprise, but in reverse. The familiar mountains rose around them. The scent of their home dimension filled their lungs. The chakra that flowed through their bodies responded with the same efficiency it always had. No dimensional strain, no neural damage, no limitations imposed by alien physics. They were home. Sasuke's Rinnegan eye, damaged but not destroyed, swirled with power as he perceived the full scope of the dimensional rift's closure. The gateway was sealed now, hermetically sealed behind barriers of physics that made return impossible. They were home, and they could never go back. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel the weight of that permanence. Then Sakura's arms wrapped around him, and Sarada joined the embrace, and he allowed himself to feel something else entirely, gratitude. Gratitude for survival. For family. For the universe's strange way of teaching him lessons he needed to learn. "We're home," Sakura whispered. "Yes," Sasuke replied, his voice carrying all the finality and peace that came with truly understanding what home meant. "We are." In orbit above their world, undetected by their sensors, the dimensional gateway's collapse had created residual quantum patterns in subspace. Those patterns would persist for years, slowly dissipating, serving as a permanent reminder that the Federation universe existed. A parallel reality where science and ethics intertwined, where leaders like Picard proved that power could be wielded in service to principle. And somewhere in the Federation, on a starship hurtling through the stars, Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood on the bridge of the Enterprise and watched the dimensional gateway's final energetic traces fade into quantum static. He'd sent 3 extraordinary people home. He'd protected his universe from destabilizing technology. He'd made enemies of the Romulan Star Empire and gained allies in the form of Starfleet officers who now understood that exploration meant genuine courage. The balance of the quadrant had shifted. And the Enterprise sailed onward into the unknown, carrying with it the memory of a family from another dimension and the lessons they'd taught a Federation that, for all its advanced technology, still had much to learn about honor, sacrifice, and the true meaning of strength. 6 months had passed since the dimensional gateway collapsed, 6 months during which the Federation's understanding of reality itself had fundamentally transformed. Captain Picard sat in his ready room, reviewing reports that chronicled the cascading consequences of the Uchiha family's brief visit to the 24th century. The ramifications extended far beyond what he'd initially anticipated, reshaping diplomatic relationships, scientific paradigms, and Starfleet's operational doctrine in ways both profound and troubling. Starfleet Command had classified most details of the dimensional incursion, but rumors had spread through the Federation's scientific community like wildfire. Whispers of parallel universes, of beings who could manipulate reality itself, of technologies that could theoretically allow abduction across dimensional boundaries. The combination had sparked a renaissance in theoretical physics departments across Federation space. Universities were being funded at unprecedented levels to explore the implications of what Sasuke and his family had demonstrated. But that same knowledge had also triggered military concern. The Klingon Empire was demanding access to dimensional manipulation technology, framing it as necessary for their defense against Romulan expansion. The Cardassian Union had initiated quiet inquiries through back channels about acquiring the knowledge. Even neutral parties like the Ferengi were circulating rumors about selling dimensional gateway technology to the highest bidder. The knowledge couldn't be contained, and Picard had known that would be the outcome even as he authorized the dimensional opening. Information, once released into the universe, spread like radiation, impossible to contain, impossible to control, affecting everything it touched. "Come in," Picard called as his door chimed, acknowledging the visitor his computer had announced. Worf entered, his Klingon features arranged in what approximated concern. "Captain. I've received reports from our contacts in Klingon intelligence. Chancellor Gowron is preparing a formal petition to the Federation Council, demanding technology transfer agreements regarding dimensional manipulation research. He's framing it as necessary for mutual defense against Romulan expansion. Which isn't entirely unreasonable from a strategic perspective, Picard replied, setting aside his PADD. The Romulans will absolutely attempt to develop their own dimensional gateway technology now that they've seen it demonstrated. If the Klingon don't have equivalent capabilities, they'll be strategically disadvantaged. Which is precisely why allowing that knowledge to spread is dangerous, Worf countered, his voice carrying the weight of his Klingon heritage's pragmatic approach to warfare. You've essentially opened a Pandora's box, Captain. Every military power in the quadrant will now be pursuing dimensional technology. Within a decade, we could see a galactic arms race that makes our current weapons technology obsolete. Or, Picard said thoughtfully, we could see unprecedented cooperation as civilizations realize that the threat of dimensional instability is greater than the threat of any individual faction. The Romulan warship that was destroyed by the dimensional collapse's shockwave. That was a demonstration that these forces operate on a level beyond traditional military capability. Perhaps that will inspire restraint. Captain, Worf said carefully, you're operating on optimism. In my experience, military powers don't respond to restraint. They respond to capability and threat assessment. What you've done is create a threat vector that everyone will want to control. Picard acknowledged the truth in Worf's assessment with a slight nod. I'm aware of the risks, Mr. Worf. But what was the alternative? Allow the Romulans to maintain exclusive knowledge of dimensional gateway technology? Allow them to continue abducting people from other universes? The path we're on is uncertain, but it was the only ethical path available. Before Worf could respond, Data's voice came over the comm, Captain, I am receiving a subspace transmission on an encrypted frequency. The encryption pattern matches the quantum protocols used during Sasuke's final message. Someone in the Naruto dimension is attempting to contact us. Picard and Worf exchanged looks of surprise. The dimensional gateway had been closed and, according to all theoretical models, should have made communication across dimensional boundaries impossible for at least several decades until quantum decoherence degraded the residual pattern sufficiently. Put it through, Picard commanded. The main view screen flickered to life, displaying not a face but rather a series of complex holographic equations that Data's processors instantly recognized as advanced Shinobi mathematical principles integrated with Federation subspace theory. The message, when decoded, appeared as text. Captain Picard. This is Naruto Uzumaki, Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village. Sasuke shared his experiences with us, and we've been studying the quantum patterns you left behind in our dimension. We've achieved limited communication capability. I wanted you to know, what you taught us, through Sasuke and his family, has changed our world. We're learning that strength without wisdom leads to destruction. That protecting people you care about sometimes means making choices that cost you personally. That true victory isn't about dominating enemies, but about creating peace. The Federation's principles, your principles, have given us a new direction. I'm requesting ongoing dialogue between our civilizations. I believe both our worlds would benefit from understanding each other better. The message ended, replaced by quantum static that gradually faded. The bridge fell silent. Picard found himself genuinely moved by the communication, not just by it. Content, but by what it represented. The Uchiha family's brief sojourn in the Federation had rippled across their entire dimension, influencing not just one family but an entire civilization's philosophical framework. Captain, Data said, his processors having analyzed the transmission extensively, this is remarkable. The Shinobi mathematical framework, combined with Federation subspace theory, suggests that the Naruto dimension has developed a hybrid understanding of dimensional mechanics that is superior to our own isolated research. If we could establish a formal scientific exchange program, the advancement to Federation knowledge could be extraordinary. That would require dimensional gateway technology we've only recently begun to understand, LaForge's voice interjected from engineering. It would take years, maybe decades, to develop a safe, reliable transdimensional communication network. Then we begin the research, Picard said decisively. Data, respond to Hokage Uzumaki with a formal greeting and a proposal for scientific collaboration. Let him know that the Federation values the possibility of peaceful exchange between our civilizations. And let him know that Sasuke, Sakura, and Sarada proved to be extraordinary teachers. The message that returned 2 weeks later, sent via the improved quantum communication channel that Federation and Shinobi scientists had jointly developed, contained a personal note from Sasuke himself. Captain. The Hokage asked me to convey his respect for your leadership and your commitment to principles over expedience. I wanted to add my own message. When I arrived in your universe, I was at a point in my life where I believed strength and individual power were the highest virtues. Your universe, and your example specifically, taught me that those virtues without compassion, without commitment to others' welfare, are hollow. I've returned home changed. Sakura tells me I'm less cynical, more willing to accept help, more capable of genuine connection. Sarada has noticed that I smile more. These are not weaknesses, I've learned from you that they are strengths. The Federation and the Shinobi world are fundamentally different, but we share core principles about what makes life worth living. I'm honored to have served, however briefly, as a bridge between our dimensions. Your principles, exploration, ethics, respect for diversity, these are principles my world needs. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is listen to their people and allow themselves to be changed by what they learn. Picard read the message 3 times, each reading revealing new layers of meaning. Sasuke had arrived as a warrior defined by combat prowess and personal power. He was returning as something more, a teacher, a voice for Federation ideals in a universe that desperately needed them. The months that followed saw unprecedented scientific collaboration between the Federation and the Shinobi dimension. Research teams were established, joint projects funded, and, most significantly, a formal non-aggression and mutual defense treaty was negotiated. The Naruto Dimension's Shinobi villages agreed to share medical knowledge and combat techniques with Starfleet, while the Federation provided advanced technological frameworks and scientific methodologies in return. The other powers in the Federation quadrant watched with varying degrees of alarm and fascination. The Klingons saw an opportunity for alliance and began their own discussions with the Shinobi world about military cooperation. The Cardassians, always pragmatic, initiated quiet negotiations about trade agreements. Even the Romulans, humbled by their experience with dimensional instability, requested limited scientific exchanges, which the Federation, with characteristic idealism, granted. The Borg, however, presented a different problem entirely. Their first action upon learning about the dimensional gateway was to attempt assimilation of any and all dimensional gateway technology. 2 Federation starships were destroyed in encounters with Borg cubes attempting to acquire dimensional manipulation data. This incident forced the Federation to implement security protocols that limited access to dimensional research, creating tension with their Shinobi partners who had committed to full scientific transparency. But the collaboration persisted, and gradually, the Federation and the Shinobi world developed something that neither had anticipated, genuine friendship between civilizations separated by dimensional barriers, operating from shared ethical frameworks rather than strategic expediency. A year after the dimensional gateway collapsed, Picard received a request that both delighted and concerned him. Hokage Uzumaki was requesting a formal diplomatic visit to the Federation, physically, using new transportation technology that the combined research teams had developed. It would be the first time a Shinobi would visit the Federation universe since the Uchiha family's involuntary arrival, and it represented a historic moment in galactic relations. The Enterprise was chosen as the diplomatic vessel, and Picard personally oversaw preparations for Uzumaki's arrival. When the young Hokage materialized in the transporter room, having traveled through a carefully controlled, miniaturized dimensional gateway, Picard was struck immediately by his informality and genuine warmth. "Captain Picard," Uzumaki said enthusiastically, extending his hand in a gesture that crossed dimensional boundaries through sheer force of personality. "I can't believe I'm finally meeting you in person. Sasuke talks about you constantly. You're like a second mentor to him, even though you only knew him for a few weeks. Picard accepted the handshake, finding himself oddly moved by the sincerity of the greeting. Hokage Uzumaki, welcome to the Federation. Your arrival marks a historic moment for both our civilizations. Please, call me Naruto, the Hokage insisted. We don't stand much on ceremony where I come from. And honestly, after everything Sasuke told us about how the Federation operates, I was expecting more formality. Over the following weeks, Naruto's visit became the most significant diplomatic event in Federation history. He addressed the Federation Council, presenting Shinobi philosophy and ethics in terms that resonated with Starfleet's core values. He toured Federation starships, marveling at the technology while offering insights about how chakra-based healing could revolutionize Federation medicine. He spent considerable time with Sasuke's family's friends and mentors, establishing personal connections that transcended political utility. But most importantly, he and Picard formed a genuine friendship. Despite their vastly different backgrounds. One a young man who'd grown up in a hidden village surrounded by chakra-based warfare, the other a seasoned starship captain educated in Earth's classical traditions, they discovered profound common ground in their commitment to peace, to understanding, and to the belief that leaders should lead through inspiration rather than coercion. You know, Naruto said one evening as they stood on the Enterprise's observation deck watching stars stream past, Sasuke told me that when he first met you, he thought you were weak. That your commitment to diplomacy and ethics meant you lacked the will to make hard choices. He was wrong about that, wasn't he? I'm not sure I'd say he was wrong, Picard replied thoughtfully. Rather, I think he was operating from a different understanding of what strength truly is. In his dimension, strength is measured by power. In ours, it's measured by the ability to inspire others, to maintain principles under pressure, to find solutions that preserve life rather than ending it. We were simply speaking different languages about the same fundamental concept. That's very diplomatic. Naruto said with a grin. But I think it's more than that. I think what Sasuke learned, what he taught us, is that both kinds of strength matter. You need the warrior's courage and willingness to fight, but you also need the wisdom to know when fighting is the wrong answer. You need the diplomat's ability to understand others' perspectives, but you also need the warrior's willingness to defend what matters when compromise becomes betrayal. Picard nodded slowly. Balance. The integration of seemingly opposing forces into a coherent whole. Exactly, Naruto confirmed. That's what we're trying to build between our dimensions. Not the Federation's way versus the Shinobi way, but a genuine integration where both approaches strengthen each other. As Naruto's visit drew to a close, Picard found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had begun with 3 refugees materializing unexpectedly in a transporter buffer. The Enterprise had been transformed by their presence, not just technologically, but philosophically. Starfleet's training programs now incorporated elements of Shinobi meditation and focus techniques. Federation medical schools were teaching hybrid healing methodologies that combined human physiology with chakra-based therapeutic approaches. Military academies were studying Shinobi combat philosophy as a way to understand ethical approaches to warfare. But more importantly, the Federation had been reminded of something fundamental. That exploration meant genuine openness to being changed by what you encountered. That principles meant nothing if you weren't willing to sacrifice for them. That true strength came from the willingness to be vulnerable enough to learn. On the day of Naruto's departure, Picard stood in the transporter room alongside Data, Worf, Crusher, and LaForge. The senior staff that had helped facilitate this unprecedented cultural exchange. Thank you, Captain, Naruto said, his hand once more extended in that gesture that had become familiar over the past weeks. You taught me, and through me, my entire civilization, that there's another way to lead. That strength doesn't require dominance. That the best victories are the ones where everyone gains something. Thank you, Picard replied, for reminding us that principles without practice are meaningless. For showing us that wisdom can come from unexpected sources. And for proving that even dimensional barriers can't prevent genuine friendship between those who share common values. Naruto stepped onto the transporter pad, and as the shimmer of the beam surrounded him, he called out one final message: tell Sasuke we're proud of him. Tell him his sacrifice, choosing restraint even when he had power, was the greatest victory he could have given us. Then he was gone, transported back across dimensional boundaries to his own universe, carrying with him the Federation's respect, friendship, and commitment to ongoing collaboration. The bridge fell silent after his departure. For a moment, no one spoke, honoring the significance of what they'd accomplished. Captain, Data said finally, I have conducted a comprehensive analysis of the long-term implications of our contact with the Naruto dimension. The data suggests that within 50 years, our two civilizations will have developed integrated technology, shared educational systems, and cooperative military structures that will fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. I imagine that troubles some people in Starfleet Command, Picard observed. Affirmative, Data confirmed. Admiral Sati has expressed concern that our commitment to the Naruto dimension has overextended Federation resources and created potential vulnerabilities. However, the scientific and philosophical benefits appear to outweigh the strategic risks. Picard smiled slightly. Data, sometimes the greatest security comes not from weapons or defenses, but from genuine friendship and shared purpose. What we've built. With the Shinobi world isn't a liability, it's an investment in a future where cooperation supersedes conflict. He turned to address the bridge crew. Set course for Starbase 515. Standard warp. It's time to share this remarkable story with the broader Federation. They need to understand that sometimes, the most profound victories come not from battles won, but from bridges built. As the Enterprise accelerated toward Federation space, carrying with it the knowledge of a civilization transformed by brief contact with three extraordinary people from another dimension, Picard stood on the bridge and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Uchiha family's arrival had been unexpected, chaotic, and dangerous. But it had also been exactly what the Federation needed, a reminder that the universe was far more vast, complex, and full of possibility than they had ever imagined. And somewhere in the Naruto dimension, Sasuke stood atop a mountain overlooking the hidden leaf village, his Rinnegan eye perceiving the quantum residue of the dimensional connection that still faintly bound his world to Picard's. He thought of the starship captain who taught him that strength without compassion was hollow, and he allowed himself to smile, a rare expression that suggested a man at peace with his choices, his sacrifices, and the unexpected path that life had led him down. The Federation and the Shinobi world had found each other across the barriers of dimensional space. And in doing so, both had become something greater than they could have been alone. Conclusion. The dimensional gateway had closed, but its impact would resonate across centuries. What began as a transporter malfunction had evolved into the most significant diplomatic and scientific breakthrough in Federation history. Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and Sarada Uchiha had arrived as refugees from an impossible dimension, carrying with them abilities that transcended conventional physics and a philosophy that challenged the Federation's fundamental assumptions about strength, leadership, and purpose. Captain Jean-Luc Picard had made a choice that transformed both universes. Rather than exploit the refugees' unique capabilities or weaponize their knowledge, he treated them as individuals deserving of dignity and protection. That choice, ethically sound but strategically uncertain, had created a cascading series of consequences that fundamentally altered the political landscape of the entire quadrant. The Romulan research facility had been destroyed, but the knowledge that had driven their transdimensional research remained secure within Federation hands and, through careful negotiation, was shared with the Shinobi world. The balance of power shifted. New alliances formed. Old certainties dissolved in the face of possibilities previously deemed impossible. More importantly, two distinct civilizations discovered that despite vast differences in culture, physiology, and philosophy, they shared fundamental values: the commitment to protecting those they loved, the belief that growth required challenge, the understanding that true leadership meant bringing out the best in others rather than dominating them. The Federation learned that exploration meant genuine openness to transformation. The Shinobi world learned that strength without wisdom led inevitably to destruction. And both learned that the most powerful force in any universe was not military capability or technological superiority, but genuine friendship forged through shared struggle and mutual respect. The stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the dramas of those who traveled between them. But on a Federation starship hurtling through the cosmos, and in a hidden village nestled in mountains of another dimension, people had learned to see beyond their own limited perspective. To perceive the vast possibilities that lay waiting when beings of goodwill chose understanding over fear, connection over isolation, and the hard work of building peace over the seductive ease of assuming conflict was inevitable. That, perhaps, was the true gift of the Uchiha family's journey. Not the advanced knowledge they brought, not the technological breakthroughs they inspired, but the simple proof that transformation was possible, that change could be chosen, and that even across the infinite barriers of dimensional space, the human heart, in all its expressions across all its universes, was fundamentally capable of transcending fear and embracing connection. The Federation would never be quite the same. Neither would the Shinobi world. And in both dimensions, that change was welcomed as progress. Live long and prosper. More stories await.